guys, and welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is doing great and enjoying the new year so far. This is going to be another ramble video where I talk about things going on in my life, and I finally get to talk about why I was gone for about a month in December, although you might have guessed from the title of this video. So if you have artwork or homework you want to work on, go grab what you need now, or if you just want to hear me talk, then buckle up because it's about to get crazy. Let me tell you the story of how my truck was stolen while I was at work. Real quick, I just want to talk about the artwork that's playing in the background. This was a commission for an old coworker. She used to take care of her closest friend's dog, and sadly she's passed away. So she asked if I could do a portrait of her so she could give it to the owners as a gift to remember her by. On top of that, my coworker also asked if I might be interested in illustrating a storybook about her adventures with this dog as well. And although I've never really done anything like that before, I figured it wouldn't hurt to try. But that's more of a long-term project though, so there isn't too much to say about it at this point. The pet portrait was definitely more in my comfort zone, since I've drawn and painted pets before. Originally it was due sometime at the end of December, but as you know, I was dealing with everything that had happened. Which brings us to this great piece of irony. That's something else that happened. I mean, I don't know what it is, just these last couple of months have been interesting. God only knows what's going to happen in December. So in order to tell the story in its entirety, I needed to create a timeline to help keep me on track and show you guys how each week basically brought on different challenges for me, because that's my life. So let's start at the beginning. Honestly, it was like any other workday. I was scheduled to come in at 9, I was going to order my department and get off at 5. So I go in, I do my job as I normally would, and finally 5 rolls around, I'm ready to go. From what I remember, I think the day kind of went by fast, so once 5 hit, I went to the time clock, clocked out, grabbed my stuff and head out to the parking lot and messaged my boyfriend that I had just gotten off. Because my job doesn't have a designated space for employees to park, we use the big parking lot in front of the store, but we are told to park towards the back as the spaces up front are reserved for customers. So I normally park pretty far back from the store, and I think this kind of made my truck an easier target. So as I'm getting closer to where I parked, I don't see my truck right away, but I don't really think much of it. Usually after I clock out, the parking lot is full and there's always another vehicle that's kind of blocking my field of view from my truck. So when I couldn't see it right away, like I said, I thought nothing of it. Of course, this was not the case this time. As I walked farther towards the back, I'm actually starting to run out of cars, and eventually I just come up to a spot that's completely empty and my truck is nowhere to be seen. I actually didn't immediately assume it had been stolen. I kind of did a double take around the parking lot just to kind of make sure I was in the right area and made sure that my truck didn't magically move parking spots for whatever reason. I even kind of dabbled with the thought of maybe my dad borrowed the truck from me while I was at work and he just needed it for whatever reason since he does live relatively close by. I knew if he had done that, he would have messaged me or told me at some point that he was going to borrow it. So since that didn't happen, I only assumed my truck had been stolen. So with no other option, I called the police and filed a report for a missing vehicle. And I just gotta say, I wasn't as stressed as one might think. I've had a similar experience before where you kind of walk to where your car is and it's not there anymore. Back when I worked at UPS, I would hang out with a bunch of friends after work, and this one particular night, because of where I parked in the area, my Jeep at the time actually got towed, and so I hadn't realized this until hours later. So that feeling of going to where your car is and it not being there wasn't necessarily all that new to me. You know, that sort of experience wasn't all that new. Like I said, I called the police and I was on hold for a few minutes. I then got to speak with a woman and basically explain the situation. After giving her all of the information that she needed from me, she also said that she would send a squad car to help me file a report. So I had to wait outside for them to show up. She did say they were close, but it took them about maybe 30 minutes or so just to actually get there. In the meantime, while I waited, I figured they would need the license plate number, which I couldn't remember, but the truck I had been driving was actually my dad's that he gave me when he got a new car, so I knew he would have the license plate number. I ended up calling my dad and told him what happened, and we just decided it'd be easier for him just to text me the information. After talking with him for a little bit, he felt sorry for me and he was apologizing that something like this, happened. And, it is what it is. I mean, there wasn't really much I could do at that point. So I said thank you and I hung up. It wasn't until a few minutes later that he called me back and asked if I had used the toll road around 10 a.m. to get to work this morning. With how close my job is, there really wouldn't be any need for me to use the tolls, so obviously that sounded really strange to me. But what really hit me was the fact that it had been used while I was already at work. Remember, I had to be at work at 9 a.m., so there's no possible way I could be using the toll roads at, 10 in the morning. So it did kind of hit me that they had been using the truck basically all day, and I had no idea. I never really found out exactly what time the truck was stolen, but honestly, I think it was just a matter of being at the right place at the right time. I assume the people who stole it didn't have a car, otherwise, why would you take mine? So I assume they were just wandering around, maybe looking for potential hits. And something I didn't mention before was that my truck was a 2002, and from what friends and coworkers told me, it wouldn't be hard for them to break into it anyway. So like I said, my dad was able to look at the toll tag and see that it had been in use all day. And the oddest thing was that it didn't really look like they were leaving the city. It just looked like they were just driving around the city. So we knew they were still somewhere, within the area. So my dad decided to take a picture and send that to me so I could show the police. And afterwards, I thanked him again for everything and told him I would let him know what would happen. After that conversation, I was still outside and it had begun to get a little chilly, so I decided I wanted to go wait inside for the police. And of course, right as I decided to do that, I think maybe about 2 or 3 minutes later, the cops rolled up to the curb. I went out there and met them, and we decided to go inside and talk. I told them everything again and also mentioned the toll tag timestamps that I had. I pulled out my phone and showed one of the cops. He then asked for my license plate number, and before I could pull it up on my phone, my screen went black. I guess with trying to get all of this settled, I hadn't been paying attention to my phone's battery life. My phone died, and I didn't have a charger with me. And of course, the only one I had was actually in my truck. So in retrospect, I should have wrote all the information down, but I didn't, so lesson learned. So with no way of charging my phone, I did end up getting a little bit flustered as to how I would get the information they needed, but also it did dawn on me that I, at that point, had no way of calling for a ride home. So honestly, that's just my luck. The cops asked if anyone here had a charger I could borrow, and I wasn't necessarily too sure myself. Come to find out later on that none of my coworkers really had the charger I needed, since I needed a Type-C charger, and most of my coworkers had iPhones or some other type of chargers. What I ended up doing was actually going to the break room, and luckily there was a manager in there, one of my managers, and I asked if I could borrow her phone so I could call my dad, because in my 26 years of life, the only phone number I can remember is my dad's. Thankfully, he's always been good about picking up the phone when it comes to random numbers calling him. So I call him and he picks up, and I explain to him again what happened with my phone and if he could give me that information again so I could write it down. Afterwards, I told him if I needed anything else, I would probably have to call him from the store phone. So just to kind of keep an eye on his phone if there's any weird numbers calling him. He said okay, and again, I thanked him for everything since he's helping me through this entire process. And I told him once again that I would call him back once I knew what was going to happen. So I finally give the cops the license plate number, and they ask me a few more questions, and we just kind of wrap up the entire process. They give me a police report with a case number. They show me what phone number to call in case I have any questions. They did take down my phone number. That way, if they heard anything, I would be the first one they would notify. And afterwards, all of that was settled. There was nothing really left to do except wait and hope that they found my truck. So that was one thing settled, but like I said, the next biggest thing was to figure out how I was going to get home. I end up using the store phone to once again call my dad, and he ends up giving me the phone number to our neighbors that we used to live next to, or at least that I used to live next to. And he says that I should call them and see if there's any way they can come pick me up, just because my dad at the time was out of town on work, so obviously there's no way he can. The neighbors that I end up calling, we've known them for years. They're really awesome. They're an older couple, mostly, kind of keep to themselves. They volunteer and they like to be involved in the community and kind of keeping watch over the neighborhood. So it's not like I'm calling complete strangers. I know who they are and they know who I am. So keep this in mind because apparently I'm about to confuse them like no other. So I call my neighbors and the wife picks up. Her name's Crystal. So I say to her, "Hi Crystal, this is Danny. I need to ask for a really big favor," and I go on to explain, kind of the situation in a relatively quick way. And there's sort of a weird pause and sort of a hesitation, and she says, "Danny who?" Like she doesn't know who I am. So now not only is she confused, I'm confused because it hasn't been that long since we've spoken. I mean, it's probably been maybe about a couple of months, but she would know who I am. And so for her to say Danny who, like she doesn't know me, really threw me off. And I thought, oh my God, there's no way. And so I go on to tell her that it's Danny, your neighbor. I used to live next to you with my dad. And again, there's a weird hesitation. And she says, both of my neighbors are dudes. And of course, this is something that can only happen to me. I understand that my voice is very soft and I suppose feminine. I do get confused a lot for a girl, whether it's on the phone or just in real life in general. So I was like, okay, I get it, whatever. But I quickly try to explain that it is in fact me on the phone to her. I start giving her random facts about myself. I start bringing up times where her and I have talked. Just anything to show her that it is in fact me on the phone. Eventually she apologizes and she realizes that it is in fact me, and we both have a good laugh about it. But after all of that sort of settles down, she asks, what was it that you needed? And I told her that my car had been stolen. I had no way of getting home and was wondering if there was any way she could come pick me up. She gladly said yes, and she sent her husband since she was actually in the middle of cooking dinner. So after getting all that settled, I could finally start calming down, knowing that I can make it home and borrow a charger from my dad so I can, call my boyfriend, let him know what's going on. At that point, I probably should have been at home already. So like I said, she sent her husband to come get me, and I waited there for a few minutes. He picks me up, and we're just kind of talking about what happened and, all the craziness of the night. And I'm just incredibly grateful that I had, neighbors that were able to do, something like that for me. Once we get to my dad's house, I thank Crystal's husband. And of course, he says, it's no problem. That's what neighbors are for. It kind of made me feel all warm and fuzzy or whatever. So I finally get home. I get to charge my phone and I get to kind of relax for a little bit. After my phone had charged for maybe about a few minutes or so, I did turn it back on. The first thing I wanted to tackle was to report a claim to my insurance, just because I didn't want to deal with that later on. So I went ahead and knocked that out. And then afterwards, I called my boyfriend to let him know what happened. He seemed really confused. He's like, "I thought you were coming home already." And I was like, "I am, but I've been having the craziest night." And I kind of gave him the quick version of what happened. And he was like, "Well, I'm glad you're okay," and all that stuff. And I was like, "Yeah, me too. I'm just glad I'm home." Of course, I asked him if he could come pick me up so I could actually go home. After I got off the phone with him, there was a knock at the door, and it was Crystal. And again, she apologized for not believing that it was me on the phone. She told me that she thought I was someone trying to impersonate myself that was trying to get information about my dad or something. I hope that makes sense. But she says that she's had that happen before, where people call sort of inquiring about their neighbors or whatever. And I'm like, nope, that's not what's happening. It was just me. she apologized and we were just both laughing about it, and I explained to her what happened and everything that I knew. She just said, well, I'm glad you're home and you're safe, and she said she hoped that they found my truck, and she wanted me to keep her updated on, what was happening and all that stuff. I gladly, said yes, and I'm thankful that, I'm thankful that they were able to help me out in a pinch. So that was just the first day. It doesn't get as crazy from here on out, but there were some other things that I had to kind of deal with, sort of the aftermath of all that. So we'll move on to that next. So it's the next day, and thankfully I have that day off, and I take that time to sleep in and just kind of, relax a little bit after all the craziness that happened the night before. I get a call early in the morning from my dad saying that he found the truck himself. Basically what he did was he was still looking at the toll tags, and he noticed that it had been used sometime early in the morning. And like I said, the people who had stole it weren't really going outside of the city. They were staying within the area. So he just decided to take it upon himself and go out and just kind of drive around and see if maybe he could find it. And he actually ends up finding it, I think at a motel or something like that. I'm assuming they're staying there. He sent me a picture of the truck. The license plate had been switched, and my dad tried to get a closer look, but from what he told me, there was actually someone in the passenger seat, so he couldn't get too close. But he could notice that there was just a bunch of crap in the truck. And at that point, he called the police. And from what my dad told me, I think the guys might have noticed that my dad was looking at the truck because they ended up, I guess, leaving the motel, just kind of driving around. I think at that point, my dad had already called the cops. Then there was a little mini car chase. And from what my dad told me, it lasted maybe about a mile. It didn't last very long at all. And he thinks that the cops may have had to shoot out my tires just because once I finally got to look at the truck, both of the passenger side tires were flat. So I don't know what they did, but whatever, they got the guys who ended up stealing my truck. Come to find out, it was a older white guy that was a little bit bigger and a younger guy who my dad said might have been about my age. So I don't know what's up with that, but whatever, they went to jail. So after talking with my dad, I think I might have fallen asleep for maybe about an hour or so. And then I got a call from the police saying that my truck was at the impound, and they gave me all the information I needed. They told me it wouldn't cost anything, so I was free to go pick it up whenever I felt like it. So I just kind of had to let my dad know, that way we could make a game plan to go get the truck. I woke up early because my dad was going to take me to a car rental place so I can get a vehicle to get around to go to my job and, come home. I also needed to be at work that day, but thankfully it wasn't until the afternoon. So we end up going really early in the morning to go get a car, and the insurance that we have would cover at least $20 a day for the week that I had it. So we go there, I talk to the salesperson. I think my dad had set it up beforehand, so it was really easy. I just kind of had to talk to the man. He ends up giving me a 2020 Nissan Altima, which was honestly a major upgrade. I mean, like I said before, my truck was a 2002, and to go from that to a 2020 was I don't know, it was I'm in the future. All of the features and stuff that car had, it was crazy. It definitely felt weird driving it because it was, completely different from driving the truck. I go through the process of getting the car. I sign the things that I needed to sign. Like I said, he gives me the car. As I grab my stuff and get into the car, I grab the keys, and I notice that the keys don't have, the little key ring doesn't have actual keys. It's just the remote to lock your car and unlock it and maybe start it remotely. And I'm confused out of my mind. And that's when I noticed that the car is actually push to start. And I've never actually had to drive a car like that before, so it was completely new for me. I was what is this weird technology? But the funny thing about that car was that it was so quiet when it was on that I actually didn't notice that it was turned on at the beginning. So I ended up turning it off, and then that's how I found out that you're supposed to like hold the brake and then push the button to turn it on. From there, I kind of, did little adjustments. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to completely like wreck this car. I drove slowly, and I gotta say that car drove super smoothly. It was completely different, like I said, from driving the truck. The brakes were like really responsive, like you barely tapped it and the car like came to a halt. It took a lot to get used to, but eventually after driving it for a week, it was just like any other car. So over the last few days, my dad and I would text back and forth about what our plan is going to be in order to, get the truck, and then figuring out, do I need to either start looking for a new car, or do we go ahead and try to, salvage the truck if we can. And at this point, I haven't gotten a call from the insurance people or anything. They're actually calling my dad, since he's the primary person that's on the insurance. So he's relaying the information that they're telling him. They needed to send out an insurance adjuster to come look at the truck to determine whether or not if it's worth saving the truck, or if they're just going to total it out and give me money to go towards a new car. So my dad and I had been texting back and forth, and there was a little bit of a misunderstanding on, I guess, my part. I understood that my dad was going to call the tow truck company that we needed to get the truck from the impound to take it to a body shop so the insurance adjuster could inspect it and kind of look it over. But I get a call in the middle of making dinner, and he tells me that the insurance adjuster is actually at the body shop already looking for the truck, but of course it's not there. Like I said before, there was just a miscommunication, so it was just a misunderstanding, but I felt bad knowing that the insurance adjuster was there at the body shop when the truck wasn't even there. I had to call the tow truck people and kind of get that set up, and they actually set it up for that day, which in retrospect, I probably should have asked them to push it back to the following day. But with everything going on and having that sort of rush to get it all set up, I was a bit anxious, and I didn't want to seem too rude or anything like that. At that point, my boyfriend had just gotten home, and he had already showered, and he was getting ready to eat since the food was almost ready. I didn't want to go to the impound alone, so I asked if he could take me there. Knowing that he had just gotten home, I felt terrible, but he said he was okay doing that. He just wanted to get something to eat real quick, and then we would, go on our way. And from what I thought, I didn't think I would need anything else other than my police report number to get my truck back, but apparently I needed release forms for the truck. I want to say that we got there maybe around 5, and when I spoke with the lady at the impound, she told me that number one, I needed release forms, but the building to go get the release forms had just closed, and it was literally right next door. I felt terrible because I, made my boyfriend drive all this way after work. I also felt like I wasted the tow truck driver's time as well, but I asked if I could reschedule for tomorrow, and he was completely cool about it. He said, hey, you didn't know that you needed all this stuff. It's okay. So we rescheduled for tomorrow, and everything kind of went smoothly from there. Okay, so this time, I made sure to wake up early, and we go to the building where we need to get the release forms, and I get them. It doesn't cost me anything, thankfully. And while we're waiting for the truck driver to get there, I had some time to kill, so I actually asked them if I could go look at the truck, and they had one of their security guys kind of escort me to where the truck was being held. But at the end of one row was my truck, and of course it's not as bad as I thought it was. I was expecting one of the windows to be broken or something because I wasn't entirely too sure how they broke into the truck, but we'll talk more about that later. Like I said earlier on, both of the tires on the passenger side were flat. There was a bunch of random crap in the back, like a lot of suitcases and just like traveling stuff. The back of my truck actually has a sort of like a toolbox type thing that you can lock, and they ended up breaking into that. I looked in it, and it had a bunch of like laundry stuff and just random things here and there. So after getting to look at it, I'm talking to the security guy, and I'm telling him all the craziness that's happened. And at that point, the tow truck driver is there already. So I hop into the tow truck with him. My boyfriend has to stay by the car. So I hop into the truck, and we drive to where the truck is. The driver asked if I could open the driver's side so he could get to the steering wheel, so he could turn the wheels so the truck could get onto the bed evenly. So we open up the truck and I notice that the steering wheel column is broken, and the tow truck driver actually says to me that with some of these older cars that all they have to do is use like a screwdriver to start up the vehicle. He starts looking around, he looks in the center console, and he actually finds a screwdriver in there. So he's like, yeah, this is probably what they use to start your truck. And that kind of like blew my mind because I had no idea. So there honestly isn't too much left to say about this day. He takes it off to the body shop. At that point, I call the insurance adjuster when we're leaving, and I let him know that the truck is going to be there whenever he's ready to go look at it. So on the 10th, the adjuster inspects the truck, and then on the 11th, my dad decides to go and pick up all of the random crap that they had left in the truck. He also ends up finding documents of other victims that they may have robbed, so he ends up calling the police so he can give those files back. A few days pass by and I haven't heard anything at this point. I get a text from my dad telling me that the adjuster just decided to total out my truck and that I'll end up getting a check for $4,000 to go towards a new vehicle. So at that point, I have to start looking for a new car. My dad does give me some advice on what to look for, and then I also take into account what it is that I may want in a car. So a few days pass by and I'm already looking at potential cars that I may be interested in. I wasn't necessarily too sure where to look, and the only place I could think of was Carfax, just because I remembered the commercials. That was literally the only reason why. But Carfax is actually a pretty cool place to look for used cars. It's completely free, by the way. I didn't have to make an account or anything. And you can send all of the information about the car that you're looking at to your phone. You can have them text it to you. I basically spent an entire night just looking for potential cars. I wanted something, even though I really did like the Nissan, I don't really like cars, like normal cars that are really low to the ground. I like trucks. I used to drive a Jeep, so I like that. I like cars that are higher off the ground. I knew I wanted something like that. I also wanted something that was kind of roomy. If I decided to make like a big purchase, almost maybe like buy a piece of furniture or something, I wanted room to like put it in the back. And then also my dad had told me that I should be looking at cars with less than 100,000 miles. So I kind of had a good idea of what I was looking for. Plus there were a few random things that I kind of wanted the car to have. They weren't necessary, but if the car had them, then that was kind of a plus. So if it had like an aux cord or if it had Bluetooth so I could listen to music, that would be great. This one was kind of weird, but I wanted the back windshield to have like a windshield wiper, which I know is kind of stupid, but the reason why is because with smaller cars, they tend not to have a back windshield wiper, which I mean would make sense. But I used to drive a Pontiac Grand Am, and there were times where whether it got really cold or if it was early in the morning, the back windshield would get really like dewy or like wet. There was a lot of condensation on it, and in order to wipe it off, obviously you kind of have to either like use your hand, or I think I ended up investing in like a dollar store like squeegee thing so I could wipe it off. You know, just having the ability to just get in your car and just turn on the back windshield wiper and have it do it for you was just kind of better for me, I guess. I don't know, because I'm lazy. Anyway, enough of my rambling. I found some potential cars and I wrote all of them down, and my dad and I were going to go look at them the following day because I had to return the rental car the next day. So we end up returning the car, and we have the rest of the day to kind of car shop. And my first pick that was on my list was actually a 2014 Dodge Journey. So the used car place is maybe about 30 minutes or so away from where we are. So we drive all that way and we go take a look at it. So we get to the used car place and we start looking over the Dodge Journey, and the people that work there notice that we're looking at it. They ask if we're interested in, looking inside and potentially test driving it. So they go grab us the keys, and Before we actually test drive it, we turned it on and we wanted to make sure that everything worked, and my dad wanted to look under the hood just to make sure that there wasn't any sort of weird sounds coming from the engine when it was on, or if there was any sort of potential thing that could cause the car to have some trouble later on down the road. So from what my dad can tell, it's working completely fine. We go and we test drive it, and my dad's asking me to go really fast and, stop really suddenly, kind of testing the brakes. At one point, I turn into like not an alley, but it's another street, and there's no one on there. So he asked me to kind of like swerve, like really turn the wheel back and forth. From what he told me, everything seemed okay. Nothing was squeaking. The brakes did kind of squeak a little bit, but it's honestly not a big deal. It was a really nice car, or it is a really nice car, I should say. After we test drove it, I really liked it, and I thought it would work just kind of right off the bat. I know it's probably maybe not the best idea to buy the first car that you go look at, but I was really kind of interested in that one. I'll be honest, I don't know much about cars myself, at least, what's underneath the hood. I just knew that it drove really well. I was really interested in sort of all of the features that it had. It actually had Bluetooth and like all that stuff, and I know that's not really what you're supposed to be looking for in a car, and that's not really what I was paying attention to. It just had, it had those things, and it had all those other little extra things that I wanted. I said right then and there that I wanted to get that car. So we go back inside and we talk with the lady that was there helping us, and they gave us an initial estimate about how much it would cost to get the car, also with the title and license plates. And I want to say it was maybe about 8,000 something, maybe a little less, but my dad talked them down to 7,500 just because I had all of the money to give them. I mean, with the $4,000 that I had, I could put in the rest and they could have the money right then and there. They agreed, and that was for everything, including the title and license plates. So we ended up having to drive all the way back 30 minutes to go to my bank just because there wasn't a facility close by to where we were. So we go and we get a cashier's check for that much, and we had to drive all the way back again, and then we purchased the car. I go in and I sign the papers, and after that, I basically had a new car. And that's probably the most expensive Christmas gift I've ever bought in myself. And I don't think I'm going to be spending all too much money here anytime soon because my savings really took a big hit. And I've had that car ever since. And I'm just glad all of that crap is over because it really just got to me. One little thing I wanted to add was, because all of that was happening, I wasn't really drawing as much, kind of fell into a little bit of a slump. I wasn't all that motivated to do anything. I know that I missed like 2 weeks of not posting videos, and I think I kind of got out of the groove of that. Even now, just trying to find it again is a little hard for me, but I'm trying to do better and I'm trying to get back into it like I explained in my other video. So we're taking it one step at a time, and hopefully 2021 won't be a big dumpster fire like 2020 was. Hopefully all of that crap is over. So with that being said, I do have some other topics that I wanted to go over, but I think I might save them for another video since I think this might be a little bit long. Hopefully any of you guys listening never have to go through anything like that. It really did suck, but we're over it now. It happened. It's in the past. We're going to leave it there. Anyway, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I post new art videos every other Wednesday, so consider subscribing to the channel by clicking my logo on the screen or the subscribe button down below. If you'd like to further support this channel and me, you can buy me a Ko-fi in the link below, and anyone who donates gets a shout out at the end of my videos. Thanks, guys.